Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Strength and Hormones podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Papanos, and today I'm joined with Tyler Dolly. He is part of the family ranch, which is Big Bluff Ranch, and they specialize in pasture-raised poultry. And we're going to be talking today about why the quality of your meat may matter more than the produce for you and the environment, and all the reasons why this is. So I'm super excited to have him to really just provide a different perspective in this conversation. I could talk to you all day long about the science of nutrition, but I think it's important for us to understand where our food comes from and all of the intricacies that go into that process, because it really just gives you a different perspective of the food that you're putting into your body and the food that you are also choosing to support, because everything that we eat is really a decision that we're making for what we want to see in the future. So thank you so much, Tyler. I appreciate you being here. I'm excited for our conversation.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, why don't you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and about Big Bluff Ranch?
Sure. Big Bluff Ranch, it was founded back in 1960. My mom's dad wanted to be a cowboy when he grew up, and so he made enough money in the building boom after World War II that he was able to buy the ranch. And that's actually why we are called Big Bluff Ranch, not because we have a big bluff or that we are in Red Bluff. Both those things are true, but that's not the reason we're called Big Bluff Ranch. The real reason is that Graham kept telling Grandpa, like, oh no, you're just bluffing yourself. There's no way you can be a cowboy. You're just a city boy. It's a big bluff. And so I don't know, some number of years later, he packed up Graham into the family station wagon with all of the kids and drove them up here to the ranch and was like, here it is, the Big Bluff. So that is why we are Big Bluff Ranch, because Graham didn't believe that Grandpa wanted to be or could be a cowboy. So we're in the Sacramento Valley of California. So we're 4-ish hours north of the Bay Area. And we've been doing all sorts of interesting things for a really long time. So there's a semi-famous guy named Alan Savory who started talking about this thing called holistic management, which is a ranch management. It's a land management. It's actually life management, where you balance your people, your land, and your animals, and that's your profit. And everything has to be in harmony, that you can't just make profit purely at the expense of extracting nutrients out of the soil. It's holistic. And so my dad started doing holistic management back in the early 80s, which, in a very simplified explanation of what it teaches you, is to manage our domestic livestock like the wild animals on the African plains. So bunches of cows moved often or moved appropriately. And that is how plants want to be grazed and how rangeland wants to be treated. And that led us to farmers markets. That led us to an online CSA for a little bit. And then eventually, through a weird set of circumstances, where I met a guy at a conference who could raise more, or he could sell more chickens than he could raise. We could raise more chickens than we could sell. 2009, we started raising lots and lots of chickens on pasture. And so we still have a decent number of cows, but by far the biggest thing that we do on the ranch is raising pasture poultry. And so we sell it on our website, and we sell to other online retailers who are interested in an organic, no corn, no soy pasture-raised chicken. And that's that's us in a nutshell, something like that.
That's amazing. And I've actually never heard of this holistic management before, but it sounds like a really awesome principle, I suppose, to function by, right?
Right.
But I'm curious to know, like, how does that compare to what most people are doing in the raising of their animals, whether it's poultry, cows?
So holistic management, he didn't. What Alan Savory did is he grabbed a whole bunch of different ideas, different philosophies, different management styles, different biological understandings, and kind of lumped it together with his own very unique twist and made it a management style that helps you make decisions that are balanced and in line with what you want to be in life. So the first thing you do in holistic management is you create a holistic goal, or nowadays they call it the holistic context. And in this statement, you basically are saying what your life, what your ranch needs, what you want it to be. And generally speaking, humans are all the same. So we're going to say something along the lines of like, I want healthy, happy family, friends. I want robust, fertile, resilient landscape, and I want to do it in a financially sustainable way that keeps me in business, taking care of the landscape, taking care of the people. Like you could say this is a version of manifestation, um, but you wouldn't talk about manifestation to a bunch of crusty old cowboys. that's not what they're going to jibe with. So the reason that we're doing pasture poultry is that we have a holistic goal. We call it a goal because we're old timers in the school.
So we know that here on the ranch that we want a functioning landscape. We want to be a profitable ranch so we can be around here for generations. And when you start with that, you start with your end in mind, a Stephen Covey principle, you start to work things backwards. And so you start saying, hey, we need to raise healthy cows. Well, what do cows need? They need grass. Okay, well, we don't have enough grass. What is healthy grass? Okay, well, healthy grass is a native perennial. Perennials are like your lawn. Depending on what part of the world you're in, they're green year round. So a plant that has green leaves year round is always capturing sunlight, taking carbon out of the air, mixing it with sunlight in the magic of chlorophyll, and putting carbon into the soil, and doing all sorts of amazing things. And that feeds the soil, which feeds the plants. And then the plants feed the cows, and then the cows feed you. Mother Nature has a really amazing set of operating principles that work passively. She's set up a bunch of rules, if-then statements, you could say, and it just happens.
Can you just talk a little bit about the differences in how you can raise poultry? So there's obviously what you guys are doing, which is pasture raised. Can you tell us, what does that mean? What are the regulations or what are the parameters that make something pasture raised? And then what is the conventional way that these, big companies that are pumping out, thousands and thousands of pounds of chicken every day are probably raising their chickens?
Right. So the conventional birds, anything you buy at the grocery store, or I should say 99.9% of what you buy at the grocery store is going to come out of what they're going to call a barn system, which is pretty much what it sounds like. It's going to be a 50 to 75 foot by 300 or 400 foot long barn. And it is it's basically a factory. It's meant to put baby chicks in, put feed in, put water in, and then pull mature chickens out and convert them into chicken nuggets for you. And so that's what the conventional guys do. So that barn is probably going to hold 20, 25,000 chickens. They're going to have a square foot to a 1.25 square foot per mature bird. So they get it packed in there pretty tight. They have to have big fans to have air exchange going on. So basically the big guys, it's wrong, but you have to give them credit that they have figured out all of the parameters that a chicken needs to grow super fast and super efficiently. So they know the exact light cycle they need. They know the exact air circulation they need. They know the exact protein requirements per day. They change the feed multiple times over the lifespan of a flock. And so that's how they can grow big chickens really quick, is that they've just got it just absolutely literally dialed into a science. But science does not always Well, it's a reductionist theory. Science does not always capture the wholeness, the whole picture of what's going on. That those barns, while they certainly are not trying to mistreat their animals, nor are they trying to give those animals their best life possible, right? So it's kind of like us humans, there's a reason why none of us like living in the office, right? We're stuck inside. We're looking out a window. We get fake light all the time. We just need to go outside every now and then. Well, that's the same thing for a chicken, that they just want to go outside, that once they're outside on pasture, that they get the full effect of the sun. They get to feel the wind. They get to see the sun. They get to chase bugs. They get to eat grass. They get to scratch in the dirt. They get to eat bugs, chase bugs, right? And so what pasture poultry is trying to do is take some of the science of the conventional guys, which disregards animalness, and put that animal in the environment where it wants to be, but bring along any of the science that accentuates and makes their life better on pasture. So that is kind of the difference between pasture poultry and the conventional guys, is that our birds, they're on grass. There's not a permanent structure on the ranch, at least for the chickens. I do live in a house. And so that's what we do. We have them out on grass pretty much from day one, and they're out there living their best chicken life. And so the thing about this is, if we're kind of talking about labels, is that the USDA has some specific labels out there: cage-free, free-range, organic, all of these sort of things. And there's just starting to be a little bit of pasture poultry that you see on label claims. The thing is that Tyson and Purdue and all those other big companies, actually, we probably shouldn't say their name. I doubt they'd sue us, but I don't think they'd like us to call them out specifically. But let's call them Big Chicken. They make billions of dollars. People who make billions of dollars have people sitting around in Washington, D.C., making sure that legislation kind of moves in their direction, right? So
the original thought of free range is kind of what pasture poultry is now. The original thought of free range is like, hey, these chickens should be out and about free ranging. That makes perfect sense. It makes sense just in the name itself. But they got in there and they changed the rules. And so free range means that there is a little door that opens up to a little patio. They even call it a patio outside of one of these conventional barns. And it's tiny. It's a patio. It's a concrete patio. Maybe they have grass, but it's nothing. It is not letting the chickens free range like you think. And so this is kind of where the industry has greenwashed us, or greenwashed these labels. And the same thing with organic. Organic does not mean the chickens are out on pasture. That just means that their feed has no synthetic inputs in it, which is better than nothing. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like, oh, it's an organic chicken. It's out on the grass and all that. That's not what organic means. Free range sounds like that, but it's not what it means. Cage free, again, sounds really good, but that just means they're living in a big barn crowded with everyone else instead of living in a cage. And cage free is much more about eggs. It's not so much about meat birds, but still, it sounds way better than it actually is. And so, unfortunately for consumers, that when you go into the grocery store, anything from your Holiday all the way up to Whole Foods or Erewhon, all of those claims that you're gonna see, where it's like they're basically all the same thing. You're not getting a truly different bird. You're not getting what you think your money is buying, because the big guys have figured out ways of circumventing and the rules, greenwashing the labels, watering down the standards, where really, if you, and you should, but you don't have to, you will survive a long, healthy life probably without doing these things. But if you're really looking to support local, small scale, regenerative type farmers, you aren't going to find it in the grocery store. That even if you go in there and you see all these fancy labels and it looks like a very rustic label and you're like, oh, it's got to be a small person. Like, no, it's some big corporation trying to trick you out of your money here.
No, it's great because there's a lot of confusion by the consumer, and it's really helpful to have that broken down so clearly for them to understand what they're getting. And I always preach buying your meat online, and I know some people, they kind of look at me like I'm crazy because it's like, well, why wouldn't you go to the grocery store for that? And I mean, with a lot of things, right? Like, I don't buy my produce at the grocery store; I buy from the farm. I don't buy my meat at the grocery store. The grocery store should be for processed things, in my opinion. The things that are on the shelf that you're not as worried about the quality, because it's very challenging to find the quality and the effort you guys are putting into it. And I think that that's the difference, right? Is that it's not just about what the outcome is for, or what we think it's doing for us, but it's also what's happening a step before that, right, with the animal. And so I want to talk a little bit about how that changes the nutritional value, like, and maybe you could just shed some light in terms of the chickens that you guys are raising. What is the differences in their health when they're pasture raised versus when they're in a barn?
So unfortunately, science, can tell any story you want it to tell. Like, there's what's the saying, that there's lies, damn lies in statistics, right?
Science tends to come to the conclusion that supports the person who funded the studies. So there are not, that I know of, many credible scientific studies that actually uphold what pasture poultry is. You can't just pull off like this unambiguous third party, like, hey, this is a better chicken because it meets these standards. Because the big chickens got billions of dollars and they have their little pet scientists and they do their pet little research studies and like, oh no, this confined bird that basically lived in jail for its entire life is the healthiest thing possible. And you're like, well, no, clearly not, because you look in these barns and you know these are not healthy, happy birds. So I can't give you like a super specific, scientifically undisputable reason why pasture poultry is better, but it is. I mean, it is. That's kind of
Taste it.
taking. You can taste it, right? I mean, so here's the things that you can taste in pasture poultry that is better than conventional stuff. So you got to remember that a healthy animal, or a happy animal, is a healthy animal. A healthy animal that you eat makes you healthy, right? And that this goes all the way from the soil all the way up to you. And so when we have our chickens on pasture, they're out in the sun, so their circadian rhythms are working correctly. They're, feeling the wind. They're seeing the stars, like all of the things. So chickens are not rocket scientists. I think we can all kind of assume that. But they actually do come with an amazing set of instincts that keep them alive, and that my job as the farmer is to arrange their environment so that their instincts keep them alive and healthy and happy. So I can't really do that if I have them in the barn. They don't get to see the sun. They don't get to see the moon, the stars. They feel no wind. They hear no rain. They have nothing going on for them. They have no stimulation. There's nothing for them to look at. And so when we bring them out onto pasture, all of their instincts start to kick in. Like, they see the sun, they see the wind, the stars, the bird, the birds flying over, and they freak out like, oh my God, I'm going to die. They're not. But like, they have that excitement. Like, they're like, wow, this is exciting. There's something exciting happening. And so what ends up happening is that they're more active. So active birds build up muscle. So like you're saying, you can taste it. Like, there's an actual textural difference in the meat. It is not at all chewy, but you're going to talk about firm. Like, there's something there. When I eat, the few rare times I eat grocery store chicken, I'm just like, this is mush. Blech. There's nothing there. There's no flavor there. So the other thing that happens is that an active bird starts developing flavor. So the firmer flesh is going to have more flavor. The other thing that's going to happen as far as flavor creation is that age equals flavor. So for everyone out there getting old, which is all of us, every day that we get older, we have a little bit more flavor in our bodies. So so the thing about raising chickens in a barn, it's all about efficiency. Grow them as fast as we possibly can. not that they're pumping them up with anything, but they're just growing super fast, right? Kind of imagine a water balloon filling, right? They're growing so fast. There's just a lot of like filler in that meat. Like there's no flavor in there. It's just grown so fast it can't develop flavor. Whereas when we grow up birds on pasture, our birds take 2 more weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the season, to get to harvest weight. And that doesn't sound like very much, but chickens actually don't live very long. So 2 to 3 weeks is a pretty significant portion of the life. So our birds have more opportunity. They're old. They've developed flavor. So we have better texture because of activity, which activity comes from like stimulation, the hawks flying over the sun, the grass, or whatever. We have more flavor because they are a little bit older. And then this is where my science rant kind of comes in. They're very, 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 I mean, how could they not have a better nutritional profile, right? They're eating grass, they're eating seeds, they're eating bugs, right? They're getting stuff that no barn-raised chicken is ever going to eat. And that a closer an animal eats to its natural diet, the healthier it's going to be. It's the same sort of thought process behind why conventionally feedlot finished beef fed a lot of corn is not super healthy really, because cows aren't really meant to eat corn. But you take that same cow that makes an unhealthy product for us to eat on corn and you drop it on grass, like boom, now all of a sudden this is like a healthy food for you. It actually makes your life better because they are eating what they're meant to be eating on grass. And so that's the same idea with the chicken. You pull it out of this barn where it's fed nothing but the most precisely balanced diet ever, and you drop it out on pasture, and it's like it's got a full fresh salad bar, and it's got all this sort of stuff. So that's an unscientifically supportable statement, but that's why it's better because it eats what it's meant to eat, and it's got to be better. Can't prove it, but you eat it and you know it's true.
Hey, I mean, there wasn't science thousands of years ago, right? And ancestors knew what was the best. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think it intuitively makes sense, and the human can see it reflected in them. And I think that that's one point you brought up, right? Is that sometimes people don't realize that good and bad, that what the animal eats is what influences us, right? So if the animal eats corn all the time and has all these omega-6s are being exposed to, then you can bet that the human that eats it is going to have higher omega-6 levels. And if the animal's eating grass all the time, then they're able to convert that into omega-3s, and then we're going to have a better omega-3 profile. So it impacts what we're eating is also one step before that, which is what are they eating, and then what's the quality of what they're eating, right? So you mentioned a little bit about regenerative agriculture. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, and why regenerative agriculture is maybe different than just like grass fed, right? And how that impacts the animal and the environment?
Current conventional agriculture basically started way back in the when hunter-gatherers started becoming farmers, that Mother Nature had stored so much fertility in her soils that we could do really bad things to the soils and still grow lots of food. And so for however many 5 or 10,000 years that we've been farmers, we've been getting better and better at extracting more and more nutrients out of the soil. And that's manifesting now in the loss of topsoil, the dead zone in the Mississippi from all the pesticides and herbicides that they spray in the Midwest. We're seeing that kind of extractive agricultural practices. I mean, everything's kind of crappy. Like pick a region that's farming conventionally, and you're going to see deleterious effects from that management style. And that organic, and I'm not the only one to notice this by any means, but other people have started to see this. This was the original premise of organic agriculture back in the 60s-ish, although it's been around, organic's been around forever, but that's kind of when the movement started. And the idea was like, hey, let's stop using all of these chemicals. Let's stop poisoning our environment so we can actually eat. But then what happened is organic kind of got sidetracked as a movement into a very specific argument about inputs. It doesn't really, no longer really talks about production practices, because that's what that's what agriculture really is management practices, cultural practices. How often you plow, how often you move your cows, do you move your cows, where do you grow your chickens, right? Those are the kind of the cultural practices, the management practices that we need to be paying attention to and change if we want to save our environment. And so about, I don't know, 15 years ago, the buzzword was sustainable. Oh, I only want to eat sustainable food, which is great. But if you imagine the level that Mother Nature was before we started farming, call it 100%. Say that over the past few thousand years that we've taken 100% from Mother Nature and we've degraded it down to, this is entirely unscientific, I have no idea, but let's say we've degraded it down to 50%. Organic was trying to bring us back up, but it doesn't. It doesn't really change anything. It doesn't put more life back into the soil. Sustainable, why would we want to sustain a 50% level, right? We want to regenerate. We want to come back up to the 100% level. And part of the reason that people got excited about sustainable is they could wrap their mind around it. There were enough fringe farmers who could prove that they were sustainable. And you're like, oh, this is amazing. Look, we have these leading lights, pioneers who have figured out these practices. But over time, people started realizing that sustainable is not enough. We can't live at 50%. All this bad stuff is still happening. We need to regenerate. We need to be moving ourselves back up to 100%. And this is where regenerative agriculture starts to come in. Regenerative agriculture really is a results practices around taking our soils, our agricultural practices that maintain Mother Nature at 50%, and let's move her back up to 100%. You are what you eat, and you're also what you eat eats. So everything we eat at one point or other was eating a plant. That plant comes out of soil. So if regenerative agriculture really goes all the way back to the soil and the microbes in the soil, and the healthier we make that, the healthier the plant will grow. So if that's, a vegetable you're eating or a wheat you're eating, right, the healthier that plant is, the better for you. Yeah, whether or not you eat wheat, that's a whole different story. And then if you put an animal who eats that cover crop, eats that wheat, eats that vegetable, if that vegetable is grown in healthy soil, the plant's healthy, that means the animal's healthy. And if the animal's healthy and you're eating it, that means you're healthy. So regenerative agriculture really is this hugely amazing positive feedback cycle where everything that we put into it comes back multiple ways to us in benefits. Everything from the soil to the plants to the animal to the humans to society to our human species. Like it's everything. I don't even feel like I've even gotten kind of like, I haven't told you how exciting and powerful this is. I've tried, but I totally can feel like I haven't got everyone jumping up and down. If you're not jumping up and down while you're listening to this, I have not explained to you clearly enough how amazing this is. So just take me for my word. If I haven't convinced you, just accept that I should have convinced you and go buy regenerative food, because this is what is going to make our environment such that our kids and grandkids and our great grandkids won't be living in droughts, won't be living in floods. We'll still be able to eat food, 100 years from now, because if we stay on the path we're on now, we're not going to stick around. But regenerative agriculture, along with other aspects, but regenerative agriculture is the thing that will keep us around as a species for the next 1,000 years, 10,000 years. Yeah. So it's just totally cool. And I hope I convinced you. I hope I convinced you.
And if I didn't, so you don't have to convince me, but I do think it's important for the listener to know for sure, and that hopefully they are convinced too and can understand the magnitude of this. And I think that one of the most important pieces of this, and you could probably talk to this more, right, is that many people believe that animals are the problem, that they're the reason for global warming, right? That it's all of the chickens and the cows and things that are causing all of these issues with global warming. And regenerative agriculture, you're saying, is a way to actually restore our environment. And I'd like for you to just talk a little bit more about, like, are animals the problem? What's actually happening with raising animals and how they're impacting the environment?
It's not the cow, it's the how. So it is not the animal's fault. It is how we are raising that animal. So if you put a cow in a feedlot and you feed it a lot of corn, yeah, that cow is doing bad things for the environment, both herself and her methane farts, but also in all of the terrible agriculture that we have to do to feed her corn in a feedlot. That's bad. That is not Mother Nature's image. If you are very specific, currently you could say that is bad and that you should not eat that beef. And I agree. Don't eat feedlot beef. I mean, we're all hardcore here. Let's just say, no, feedlot beef is bad. It is bad for you. It's bad for the animal. It's bad for the environment. It's bad. It should not exist. And it's actually a pretty recent phenomenon. Like the whole feedlot industry really started around the end of World War II. We call it conventional beef or conventional agriculture, but everything we're doing right now is actually not very old. It does not take very much digging around to go back to more organic, more regenerative practices. You can still buy books from the 1930s before all of the chemicals came into agriculture, and they had it down really amazing. They were talking about cover crops in the official land grant universities where all farmers go to get taught, or many farmers, like the textbooks in the 1930s were teaching you about cover crops, right? That's not, my grandparents were doing that. So in conventional farming, you are going to do a cash crop being something you sell for cash. So all corn, all wheat, all soybeans, all something. That is your cash crop. And then usually what farmers will do is they get their cash crop off, they till up the ground, and they leave it barren. Nothing's growing until the next cash crop. And so without getting into too many details, Mother Nature does not like barren soil. She wants a living root in the ground as much as possible. And so a cover crop is a crop that covers the ground between your cash crops. And so when you do a cover crop, you are not necessarily going to sell it. You possibly could, but that cover crop is all mostly focused on soil health. So you're going to make a diverse mix of this, that, and the other thing. You're going to have legumes, you're going to have grasses, you're going to have flowers. Cover crop science is actually pretty fascinating. I'm not in any ways an expert in it, but it's very interesting. And you can tailor the mix of your cover crops for your next cash crop. Like if you want more nitrogen in your soil, rather than buying it from a petrochemical company, you grow legumes like alfalfa or beans, and they put nitrogen in the soil. Cover crop's good. You terminate that cover crop in various ways, and that when you come back and you plant your corn into that cover cropped area, all of that natural nitrogen has been placed in there, and you don't actually need to buy synthetic nitrogen. So cover crops are a very important part of regenerative farming, because humans are still going to need row crops. Like, we're not going to ever move away from big fields of plants grown for us to consume. So what we need to do is figure out how we can get what we need for our calories, but still maintain the health of the soil. And the cover crops are kind of that intermediate step where you go from cash crop, soil health. So it's like, our health in the cash crop, soil health in the cover crop, our health in the cash crop, something like that, right? So we give as much as we get.
Sure.
So,
but the conventional isn't doing cover crops for the most part. Is that right? No.
For the most part, conventional agriculture is going to see any plant other than its cash crop as a weed, and don't want it there. Because if you are really in conventional agriculture, you are very focused on a single thing. And anything that's not that thing becomes a complexity that you can't manage well. You're like, no, just get rid of everything. I only want corn in this ground. Everything else has got to go. So, because it's simpler. I mean, not to say that it is simple, but it is simpler to just grow only corn.
Yeah.
And that you can kind of design things around only corn. When you start adding a whole bunch of other stuff to the crop, like, it gets confusing and complicated and complex. And you're like, oh my God, and then this and then that. It becomes takes a lot more. I don't know. I can't even say it takes more brain power, because I don't want to make conventional guys sound bad. They are doing the absolute best that they know how to do to grow healthy food for people, keep their family on the farm, keep their communities healthy. Farmers ultimately, this is kind of the cool thing about regenerative agriculture, and kind of it's going to have to shift to regenerative, is that all farmers, remember way back at the beginning, I said that holistic management, everyone's context is usually about the same. The words are going to change, but healthy people, healthy land, healthy animals. All farmers love the land, and that they want it to be there for their kids. It's kind of a weird little quirk in our cultural DNA. And so not a single person is out there being like, oh, I'm just going to poison my land. Yeah. Right. I don't care. I'm just going to poison it. And so the only reason that they are poisoning it, if they would even acknowledge that, is that because they're poisoning it only so that they can do a better job as they see it right now. And so regenerative agriculture is the promise of regenerative agriculture is so profound that if you can get to these conventional guys and say, hey, here is a thing that you can do that actually makes your ground healthier, that makes you healthier, and makes you more money, they're going to be all over it. I mean, there's a lot of conventional guys. There's a lot of industry inertia. It's not going to happen in an instant, but it is almost a foregone conclusion that this change will happen.
And regenerative agriculture, just to be clear, is the way. It's like your philosophy, right, of the way that you farm. But it doesn't necessarily like guarantee, but I think it kind of indirectly guarantees, right, that the animal is pasture raised and or usually grass fed. Is that correct?
Yeah, indirectly. Yeah. So regenerative agriculture is so new that it is a management style. It is not really codified into certifications. We at our ranch are being certified regenerative through an organization called Regenified. Regenerative agriculture is awesome, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is certified organic, it is certified grass-fed, or certified any of that sort of stuff. In actual practice, if you are a regenerative farmer, you are probably doing all that stuff because it's the right thing to do anyways.
That's great. And then could you also, because I don't think we clarified this earlier, could you also clarify the difference between pasture-raised and grass-fed? I know that's not with poultry, but when it comes to cows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so pasture-raised is usually that's a term that will be referred to as far as pasture or poultry, like you're saying. So that's going to be pasture-raised chickens, pasture-raised turkeys or ducks or whatever. And then grass-fed is going to refer to ruminants, so sheep, lamb, goats, cows. The reason that those are kind of differentiated is that chickens, poultry are monogastrics, which means that they are designed to eat seeds. So they want corn. We don't feed corn, but they want seeds. So corn or wheat or milo or millet. These are all things that monogastrics kind of need to eat. So that's why you pasture raise chickens. So chickens will be on pasture with grass, but they will usually get some level of supplemental grains. Okay. Whereas ruminants cannot or should not be eating seeds. And so that's why you call them grass fed. So they only get grass. I mean, yeah, there might be some seed heads in the grass they eat, but it's not like you're giving them buckets of grain. Right. Yeah. So that's kind of the biggest differentiation is pasture raised is for monogastrics that are evolutionarily adapted eating grain. Grass-fed is for ruminants that are evolutionary adapted eating only grass.
Got it. And what's always amazed me is how a cow weighs so much, how they get to be so big, and they just eat grass. That's
Right?
sustainable. And I know that they eat a lot of grass, but it's truly wild to me how that math adds up.
Right? Yeah. So a cow eats, this is a random statistic for you. A cow eats 3 to 5% of her body weight a day in grass. So, that means, call it 1,000-pound cow. So she's going to eat like 50 pounds of grass a day. But then you can get really fancy about this. You can talk about empty mature body weight, and you can talk about stages of lactation, and you can really, there's science about all this sort of stuff. You can really dial in. That 3 to 5% is like such a wide range, but you can dial it in really closely. Like, how big is her calf? Does she have a 500-pound calf, a 200-pound calf? Is she, first trimester, third trimester? So she normally, if she is a dry cow, meaning she's not lactating, she's going to be eating about 3% of her body weight. If she's at birth or, in heavy lactation, she's probably at 5%, maybe 6%. And then you're like, okay, that's cool. So now we know how much grass she's going to eat. And then this is where we become active managers. We're like, okay, in California, we're in a Mediterranean climate. That means that we're golden. We're the golden state. We have lots of dry grass for most of the year. So that's basically hay. That is stored forage that's no longer growing. So you can do some math. You're like, okay, we've got 4,000 acres. We have about 100, or we'll probably have like 25 animal days per acre, which is a technical term. Like, how much feed is on an acre? How many cows can you eat 1 acre per day? I don't know, I'm being silly here, but basically you can figure these things out by knowing how big your cow is, how heavy she is, what sort of stage production she is. You go out and you figure out how much grass you have, and you match your cow herd to your feed, and that's what is called your carrying capacity. And so this is a technical aspect of raising regenerative kind of ranching, is that you never want your cow herd to exceed your carrying capacity. If you're above your carrying capacity, that's kind of like taking on debt. That's like a credit card that you are eating. You're extracting more feed value than we actually have. And you can get away with that for a year or two or 50 years, depending on your situation. But you've exceeded your carrying capacity, and at some point you're going to have to pay the bill.
That's truly wild. I know they're just eating all day long, but it's just wild when you think about just the differences in how they eat versus how humans and other animals eat. I want to, before we wrap up, to touch on just historically what the differences are in how people are eating proteins. So I'm very passionate about people eating nose to tail, and especially eating bone-in meats, because it vastly changes the amino acid profile. It gives us more glycine, more glutamine that are essential for our skin, for our gut, for so many functions. And so many people are just going to the store every week and they're just buying chicken breast every single week, week in and week out. And you're getting the same amino acid profile over and over again, and you're lacking in some of these other amino acids that are incredibly essential. And so I just want to talk a little bit about, like, historically, what have we seen change in terms of how people used to eat proteins, how they used to eat poultry or a cow versus how people are eating it now, and how that impacts you as a farmer.
Right. So luckily I'm being interviewed by a nutritionist, so I don't have to get into the amino acid profiles, because I'm pretty sure I would get that 100% wrong. But what I would do is I kind of go back to kind of higher level historical understanding of these things. So if you think back to the hunter-gatherer days, it's not easy to hunt and kill an animal. They're pretty good at it. They're way better than we are, but that still takes some effort. And by the time you go to the effort, you're not just going to eat the fillet out of that bison that you killed, right? And leave 90% of the carcass behind. You're like, holy crap, I killed that thing. I'm going to eat the whole damn thing. Not only because it's healthy and makes me feel good, which they seem to have a very intuitive sense that all of these things are good for them, but also just kind of from a calorie efficiency. Like, I ran all day long to kill this thing. Like, I'm freaking hungry. I'm going to eat the whole damn thing. And also another way of thinking about this is that I said Mother Nature never farms in a monocrop. It never does just corn. It never does just cows. She always has a mixture of species, a mixture of everything. Well, the same thing kind of holds true with how we should be eating our diet, right? If Mother Nature is always a smorgasbord of a little bit of this, a little bit of that, well, that's what we should be eating. We should be eating a little bit of this and a little bit of that, because if we were back in the hunter-gatherer days, that's what we could hunt and gather, is a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And you can kind of take that at a macro level between the mix between plants and animal proteins, or plants and animals. And you can also take that at a more micro level as to when you're actually just eating a cow, that Mother Nature gave you that whole cow for a reason, right? So you should eat as much of that as possible. That there's the complexity of the amino acids and the collagen versus the muscle meat versus the bone versus the marrow meat versus, all that sort of stuff, versus the different, the organs, the offal, how the heart and the liver, all this sort of stuff. That Mother Nature is kind of a fractal in design, where every part of it is as complex as the whole thing. So Mother Nature, if you look out your window, you're like, wow, that's really complicated. Well, when you pull that all the way down and look at just the complexity of just an animal, it's as complex as the whole thing. So that's kind of my personal wackadoo philosophy on why I think we should be eating more than just chicken breasts, because there is no natural example of something that just eats one thing only. Well, there might be. I just thought of like your humpback whales eating only krill, but I bet you they eat different types of krill.
Yeah. Well, and a chicken doesn't just grow with breasts, right? So
Right, exactly. And so, and then I guess I should say just a little bit, the reason why I don't think we eat like that anymore is that the way the food industry has evolved, basically since the war, is that they make the most money on the breast between marketing and weird science and weird diets, that we, as just a kind of intuitive eating consumer, are totally misled as to what the best healthy food should be for us to eat. And so we have been taught that, chicken breasts are super lean, they're super healthy because it's a lean meat. And you're like, well, again, I'm talking to nutritionists, so correct me when I'm wrong, but like, we need a little bit of fat in our diet. That's being only lean meat doesn't actually, make you better. You're probably should be way more concerned about the amount of sugar in your diet than the amount of fat in your diet. So that, in my super unscientific, farmer style philosophy, that's why I think we should eat a whole bunch of different stuff, is because Mother Nature grows a whole bunch of different stuff. So why do we think we're smarter than she is?
Yeah. Well, and I always argue too that, what are the lowest calorie foods, which is like chicken breast, right? It's like the lowest calorie part of a chicken is going to be the most nutrient void. Like that's where that it's lacking the most nutrients, right? As you get into some of the fattier cuts of the meat, that's where you actually get more fat soluble vitamins like vitamin A and D and E and these nutrients that so many of us are deficient in. So low calorie doesn't mean that it's healthier, but unfortunately that's what marketing has done, is it's convinced the consumer that they should be focused on eating as minimal calories as humanly possible. And that's the complete opposite really of how we achieve optimal health, right? But it's all a balance. So thank you for sharing so much of this information and insight. And it's truly fascinating to me. And honestly, I just want to go give your chickens and cows a big hug right now.
Well, come on up. That they would be happy to see you.
I'm sure. So tell us a little bit about what you guys offer and how our listener can learn more about you and sign up for your services.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. I would be happy just to talk about this stuff, even without the nice ability to plug us, because this stuff, people just need to know about this. I'm silly passionate about it, and I'm glad that. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope everyone listening, at least is a little bit of excitement and goes and does a little bit of research and gets as excited as I am. So we're Big Bluff Ranch, bigbluffranch.com. We do ship chicken. You can order online and we'll ship it to you. We're kind of in the midst of a website redo, so I don't know when you're going to see what our website looks like, but we've got all the cuts up there that you might want as far as chicken. We are going to do turkeys again this year. So we're going to do some pre-sales in June and then do some regular turkey sales in November for your turkey day. And we also, I mean, this is kind of a random thing. The ranch actually has a big lake on it. Grandpa built it, part of his pretending to be a rancher, and we have a little lakeside cabin that we rent out. So when you said you wanted to come up and hug the cows and chickens, I was like, actually, you can stay at the lake and hang out at the lake and then go hug the chickens. So if anyone actually is, in the Bay Area, Sacramento Bay Area, or anywhere, you can fly from New York if you want to, although that's a long way. But if you're close enough and you want to, come on out to the lake. We'd be happy to host you, and you can do a little fishing, a little swimming, take some chicken home. Yeah, awesome. That's us, bigbluffranch.com.
I love it. Thank you. And we'll include the link in the show notes below. But thank you so much, Tyler. It was really great talking with you today.